Welcome to the T4TCS podcast and YouTube channel. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and provide your feedback in terms of ideas and topics that you believe are related to T4TCS. We would like to take the time to let our viewers and listeners know that the information discussed here is not to be interpreted as a clinical approach to trauma and psychology. T4TCS was designed to provide insightful information on topics related to post-traumatic growth, finding solutions to somatic healing through a mind and body connection that works for you. It also serves as a platform for members from various communities to learn about positive effects of a trauma-informed approach to self-defense and martial arts training. And now, take the time to enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody. It's been some time since we've actually recorded a podcast for T4TCS. We had our last one, I think, was just before Christmas. Wishing everybody happy holidays, talking a little bit about, some of the, the holidays is not so happy for everybody, and just to take care and to reach out to people that we think or that we may know of that are having some issues. Um, we've been doing a lot of training in the background though. And one of the cool milestones for myself, actually for the whole team here at T4TCS, I got to actually reach a specific milestone with respect to my physical training. And that was to be, I successfully passed, although it wasn't easy. I passed and I went through the gauntlet to become a level 1 or T4TCS level 1 combatives instructor. So thanks everybody for joining that day and helping me out and really pushing me to the limit there. So that wasn't easy, but it's well worth it. Thank you. And the brainchild of these programs from the physical aspect, the combatives aspect is Mark for sure, as well as the drilling and the pressure testing that we get to do with Jacob. A lot of the stuff that we get to do running around the dojo until we can't move anymore. So that was great. One of the other thing, or a couple of other things too, that are amazing that are going to be happening this year is that we got a call from one of the, actually he was a lieutenant, and he's just recently promoted to captain in the Royal Canadian Air Force Cadets out in Coburg, the Sabre Squadron. He reached out to us, and then we're also going to be, we're going to be helping them out with some mental health discussions during their parade night one night. And then that turned into doing some basic self-defense drills and training the same night. So that's really cool. The ink is dry also on the speaker agreement. I'm going to be going to Alberta and speaking about the trauma-informed approach for the Alberta Community Crime Prevention Association. So that'll be May 6th. Everything's all set and ready to go. So it's a busy couple of months for us. We just recently went through a knife defense seminar with Clarington Martial Arts. And that one actually was a really successful seminar, I think. That was through JKD Combative Sciences. Mark had put that on, but there was over 20 students, and it was an amazing experience. The feedback from that was really awesome. So we're getting some awesome traction. And recently, I thought of it, and I wanted to reach out to Jenny Brackman. She is the creator. She built the post-traumatic growth specialist program. One of the programs that I took last year, I think it was Jenny, July, August.
I know you finished it in the early fall.
Okay, that was early fall, September, I think it was. Amazing program, and I loved how much it connected to the traumatology studies I'd previously done. And it also enhanced it in terms of the resiliency side of things, and then the post-traumatic growth. And I'm going to let you talk about that a little bit more, but that's how you and I met. But about a month ago, I'm thinking about it, and I know we had discussions because I was going to try and take one of the courses, the forward-facing coaches, but then I heard back from the school that I'm going to be attending, and I got accepted to become or to attend the registered clinical hypnotherapist program, and it's a 1-year accelerator program. So once I'm done, I'm going to concentrate on trauma recovery. So that came into my plate, but then I thought I would love to actually have, because you and I had a conversation about martial arts beforehand and how you used it to help you and how you love using it because it helps you be in the moment. But I'm not going to steal your thunder. I would like you to explain to the viewers and the listeners, what is it that got you involved in first the creation of the post-traumatic growth specialist program, and then what were your strategies? And we'll talk about that and we'll have a free flowing conversation. What were your strategies when you were coping with certain aspects of your life that were difficult for you, and how you incorporated your martial arts training, and then also your studies, because you have quite the background in mental health.
Thanks. Well, good to be here. I always can feel like I can hang with the guys because I have 4 younger brothers, so it's a happy spot to be. But yeah, so the post-traumatic growth specialist, that was about a 2-year undertaking that I got inspired to do because as I was training coaches, I found that a lot of people like the 4 of us who aren't clinicians, but who have passion to help people who are recovering from adversity, however you want to put that in the context, whether it's through an organic relationship, whether it's through a coaching relationship, peer support. Once you kind of learn the basics of trauma, mental health, first aid, it didn't seem like there was this comprehensive course that was simultaneously in depth, that wasn't dumbed down or watered down, and that was directed to the non-clinical population. So what happened with myself, my colleague Emily Hedrick, who helped develop the course with me, is once we resorted to taking clinical courses. And I don't know if it's been your situation, Eric, but I remember even doing things like clicking the purchase button and almost wanting to like look over my shoulder. Did anybody see that I just did that? Am I allowed to do this? And I found out that feeling of registering, taking for courses designed for clinicians was not just my experience. It was the experience of a whole lot of people who really want comprehensive education, but aren't a clinician. And so Emily and I designed this course so not based from, but we wanted an equivalent to Dr. Gentry's 2-day trauma competency course, which has been taken by hundreds of thousands of mental health professionals worldwide. And but as we began developing it, we realized it made a whole lot more sense in the context of post-traumatic growth, because post-traumatic growth is this phenomenon, and we'll talk about it more later, but so not to go into too much to it, but there's the research around it is there's this phenomenon that's naturally occurring in some people who have experienced trauma or adversity. And it's something that happens after the event in which they find themselves better, not just recovered, but one step better. And so in developing this course, what's interesting is the founders, Calhoun and Tedeschi, they said that post-traumatic growth is best facilitated by what they call an expert companion. That's their wording. And so we started thinking and using their research based on, okay, how can we equip people to be the best expert companion possible as they walk with someone who's experienced adversity or trauma? And that could be an expert companion for an hour. You know, if you're talking about an acute case, you have a first responder, or it could be someone who's been an expert companion for a couple of years. And so, yeah, so we developed that program, which led to Eric and I connecting as a student. And so as the creator, I get to see we have a comment and discussion section. And so as Erica's putting in his comments, I thought, man, this guy's really sharp. And I was like, I really am liking what he has to say here. And then the moment I saw like the combination of, martial arts and trauma-informed care, well, that's two of my biggest passions. So maybe I'll switch now to my martial arts background, like you asked. So we adopted my family. So now I'll switch to the personal side. So my family, husband and I adopted a sibling group of 3 in 2012. And so we already had 2 kids. So we went overnight. We had 5 kids, 6 and under. And
Wow.
don't have a trauma background, that's a lot. If you do have a trauma background, that's a lot. And so 2 years in, we got our kids into Taekwondo because, just looking for regulation and something they could all do together. And a couple months into it, it was an insane amount of work to get 4 tiny kids in their gis, get their belts tied, all this stuff, plus the baby who, wasn't doing it, get them in the car. It was so much stress to try to do that. And so after a month or 2 of sitting there, I was like, I could just be sitting here during class on my phone, or I could join them. And I was like, previously if there could be a reverse interest in martial arts, that was me. My brothers did karate when I was growing up, and I was like, why would you want to do something where you could get hurt? I just could not conceive. And so as I started doing class with them, I realized, wow, this feels really good. And I fell in love with it. A number of months later, I think I was turning 36. That was a long time ago. I think I was turning 36, and I decided that it was my turn now, that I wanted to do martial arts for me. And so in that system, ATA Taekwondo, I started training and competing, got my first degree black belt, my second degree black belt. I ended up, I think in 2017, I ended up getting the silver medal for nunchucks. That was my thing.
That's cool.
That's pretty cool. And then some things happened, but so that was a critical period for me where learning how to regulate my body under the context of perceived threat and learning, I could go into all that I learned, but I'll just get back to the story. Then there were some things happened and I had to stop Taekwondo. And so just because of the convenience and the time scheduling, I ended up moving to Muay Thai and trained in Muay Thai for 4 years. And that was a whole different experience because Taekwondo is all about the flashy kicks, which guess what? Means that you're always off balance. And so the couple injuries I had in Taekwondo were all balance related ones where I wasn't centered. And so getting knocked off balance, either by my own lack of proprioception of where I was, even for a millisecond, and meant I once broke a toe. The other time was a really bad injury where I folded my foot in half. That was bad. And so the interesting thing about Muay Thai as a transition from Taekwondo is now here I am, I'm square. So everything in my body is square. And it's all about lower gravity and being more centered. And so that was a fantastic experience. Definitely was a whole year of learning to relax my body with punches coming to my head. Because in Taekwondo, we don't receive punches to the head. And so a lot of, forward facing is all about pairing exposure with relaxation. So how can I relax and so that I can handle punches coming towards my head and when my brain tells me this was wrong. And then that was about 4 years. And then 2023 was the year that I thought I would be fine without martial arts. And
Oh,
and, and I had this the one Muay Thai place I was at wasn't working out anymore. And I had a hip injury from overuse. So I was like, okay, I got a motorcycle. I'm like, I can't afford both. I'll still work out and I'll be fine. Well, at the end of 2023, I thought, what is wrong with me? I'm just not doing so well. And I realized it was the lack of martial arts. And so I was looking really for a place where I could experience longevity as, a woman in my mid 40s. And uh, again, kind of started jujitsu because the schedule worked out,
yeah,
and that was a whole new experience of everything that jujitsu is, where striking sports are a really quick satisfaction. It really feels good to punch and kick things. Jiu-jitsu is just many months of of being smashed and kind of suffocated. And especially like if you can't tell, I'm barely 5 feet tall, very petite. So I'm always the tiniest no matter where I go, which is very interesting in jiu-jitsu. And so jiu-jitsu was more of a mental battle of learning, can I be okay when I can't actually process this much verbal instruction? And that's where most of my triggers came up was uh, I can tolerate being uncomfortable physically, but can I tolerate the feeling that I can't get this? And that's where I have to
yeah.
do the work. And so, yeah, so then I've been in that about 14 months and doing my first tournament in a month. So that's my new challenge to myself.
Wow. Good for you. Congratulations. That's a lot of courage too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll ask one question, and I know Mark he's always prepared to ask because he's good. He's in tune to this, and same with Jacob. But in terms of the jujitsu side, and that's not an uncommon thing for people to say. And I also saw Mark's head kind of going like this, like when you said that you took a year off and you tried, and then you finally it clicked that moment where you said, Wait a minute, what's wrong? Oh, it's because I haven't done my martial arts, right? Um, and again, that's why we have focus, agency, and regulation. Being in the moment is key to so many things and not thinking too far ahead. And then specifically in jujitsu and also in trauma recovery process, forgetting about everything else and focusing on the problem, but also looking at the solutions and where we can go forward, right? And that's that post-traumatic growth. What is going to make us succeed in the future? How can we take what we're doing right now and what we're dealing with and then find tools to fix in the future and to move on, not to fix it because we're not looking at the pathogenics of it. We understand that, but the focus is on the salutogenics, which I read that book, by the way, because you mentioned it in your program.
Mm.
I downloaded it right away. The beautiful thing is that it was free, but it's a very awesome book. My
And the
question is,
title, just so everybody hears, the
yeah.
title of the book.
Oh, I can't remember the complete title of the book, but it was
Okay.
Salutogenesis, and I can't remember who wrote it.
Okay.
Yeah, I could share it actually. I'll put all the links to the books, and that's
Yeah,
usually
yeah,
what I
we'll
do
put the show notes.
in the notes and the comments and YouTube and stuff, and then also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. My question to you, when you were saying when you started the jujitsu stuff, and I read Jamie Marich's book, Trauma Recovery or the trauma recovery or trauma therapy through jujitsu. Um, Really great book, and she actually talked a little bit about it. But from your perspective and where you're sitting and what you do in terms of mental health, that feeling that you had, how like where did it take your mind in terms of because you mentioned the triggers? How did you overcome that and really get into the moment and then move past those triggers, those trigger points? Because we talk about it, Mark, Jacob, and I, to a lot of the people that we speak to. It's different to have a woman's perspective on it because not everybody has that. And then
Mhm.
so what were the tools that you use and you started to pick up on and take from your toolbox to help you out?
Yeah, thanks. I think first is was awareness. And I remember a comment I made to one of another female student I made very much at the beginning. You know, being a type A competitor, I was like, I'm going to learn this as fast as possible.
Mm.
And when I could be aware that my own expectations were the biggest problem in my success. And um, when I could come to the realization and accept that different days I would have different capacity for verbal processing. Like I
Mm.
actually, there's a thing that has been studied of like physical dyslexia where you're even the proprioception of being aware of like where's my right and my left right now. There for
Oh,
some
okay.
people that's harder. Um, and so it was so it was being first of all awareness of here's the pressure I'm putting on myself.
Yeah.
And so moving to acceptance of the body and the brain that I bring to the mat every day, that it's going to look different. That sometimes I will be able to process and I'll be like, okay, I get it. And the other times I would give myself permission that, okay, I just heard 3 minutes of this instruction and I'm going to give my brain permission to check out now. Not
Ah,
truly check out, but realizing I can't remember anymore after this. But I think actually the core for me was it was one class and uh it was my husband, he had started too, so we were there together. So it was maybe April. So I was maybe 3.5 months in. And the instructor, whatever it was pretty it felt complex and I couldn't get it. And I just about lost it emotionally. And I was like just right there on the verge of tears, but not like the verge of a tear, on the verge of like I'm going to lose it. But
yes.
that was kind of a turning point for me when I didn't really realize that I have a really big perceived threat of not being able to understand information because if
Okay.
my past painful learning history is I need understanding to have safety.
Right.
And so I really needed to have the awareness that this is the demand that I'm putting on myself is in my own way. And so once I could do that, and I had to have a very strong concrete awareness because say for other females who maybe it's a positional triggering or some body
Yeah.
thing, to me that seems more concrete of like, oh my gosh. But when it's just a mental state, it's more abstract. So I really had to put language to it, that it is okay that I can only process up to this point.
Right.
And so that really helped. And then getting lots of reps. And the other thing that helped was the first couple of months just focusing on my breathing and focusing on, let me just make this person's goal hard for them. So I
Yeah.
don't really know much, but I think I can figure out how to make what they want to do more difficult. So making it very basic instead of trying to remember this and this and this and that.
Right. So just, yeah, make it difficult, trap them up, stop the movements from their hands, their feet, wherever they're trying to go, and just
Yeah.
disrupt them.
Hmm.
Okay. I like the term that you used, and I've never heard it before, but it makes total sense when you say it. The physical dyslexia. Where did you hear about that? Because it makes me think of certain things that, when I'm training with Mark, where when I watch him do it, it's like it looks easy, and then I go to try and do it, and I look like an octopus stuck in a ceiling fan. But it's like it's not my it's my brain trying to transmit the movement, and I'm just not used to it yet. So when you said that, it made a ton of sense. Where was you the first time you heard that, and how did you use that in your own, like, in your processing? Because it's really cool to think about it that way.
Yeah, it I heard it from my initial Taekwondo master, the lady who owned all of our Taekwondo academies, and she was petite like me, and she was the one who explained it because as I saw myself struggling through different forms in Taekwondo, she was like, "Oh yeah, this is what it was like for me too." And so I haven't. I would love to actually read research about it, but if I have, it was years ago and I don't remember.
Right.
But how I've used it is I think about when I hear it that way, it makes my struggle less personal. It makes it
Uh,
less about, oh, I can't get it. It's not a frustration. It's more of, okay, I need something differently. So it's kind of this humility and acceptance wrapped together that if I need to practice it again or ask a question again, that's okay. It makes it more factual and less charged, whatever struggle I'm having.
so okay, so it's kind of like having the question or having the conversation, in understanding from a trauma's perspective. It's, knowing that, in understanding, first of all, having the understanding that the way we're reacting to a perceived traumatic incident and how we're dealing with it is a normal thing because of an abnormal situation. So what we need to do is just basically put an understanding to what occurred and how we're
Yeah,
dealing with
I
it.
like
If that
that.
makes, if I'm
Mhm.
into that, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, Mark or Jacob, do you guys have any questions?
I like how, like, through the lens of like, I train Jeet Kune Do, so one of the arts I train, and really it's about not being stuck to any dogma or tradition. It's about to understand the art through your own experience and through your own attributes. And so everybody's going to have a different strength, and everybody's going to have a different way of doing things, or be more naturally to do certain things, for like grappler versus striker. And what you're explaining to me is kind of like how I started to experience martial arts as well, because I started to learn to try and do things the way it was taught to me. But it always felt to me as like, I understand the purpose and the mechanics required to do this task. However, this doesn't sit or settle well with me because my tendencies or my natural abilities, I'm more inclined to go about it through a different approach. So what it did was just it started to spark the, well, how do I learn really, and why am I doing this? Not just how do I do this, but why would I do this? And so I really started to have me look internally into my own process or self discovery, and to start to ask questions. Now that comes with a lot of heat because when you, especially today is different because there's so many different mixed gyms, but we're talking about a time where it was basically like you might have that experience through your traditional origin, right? Your taekwondo. Um,
Mhm.
it's very, very much rooted in tradition and culture, and I think that's beautiful as well. I think everything is needed. However, when you go to a taekwondo school, you're going there to learn taekwondo. But when you do martial arts, you're learning to do martial arts, and martial arts can mean a very vast thing, right? So I just really like the way that you put that together, and you just kind of understood what the challenge was, understood yourself enough to understand that you needed to go about a different approach. And I didn't have that same experience, but I could kind of relate through my own way of navigating what kind of martial artist I wanted to be, and just having the courage to kind of like seek it out and test the waters in other places, and kind of like crowdsource the information, and then bring it back to where I could now maximize my efforts through that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. That's sort of, that approach is how you and I met, essentially, Mark. That
Yeah.
as I was seeking, I was looking for a different. I was looking to I'm still doing it. It's a journey, like, for the rest of my life, but it's just using those pieces, those blocks, to create my own flavor in the end, where that's what people know me for. And it's me. It's my personalized approach. The fundamentals are still there, but that's how it works for me, and that's what I love about it. And in terms of the trauma informed part, that's what I like about that kind of approach, because we're not rigid, right? We're allowed to grow. We have a sense of agency, and we can grow and be challenged. Um, I will have a couple of things that I want to ask because we're kind of there at that point. But Jacob, if you have any questions or you have comments or anything like that at this
Oh,
point.
actually, I have the. I really like how you mentioned that you allow yourself to mentally check out when you're absorbing information, and especially in jiu-jitsu, because I had that same problem where I was trying to absorb everything, but I kind of come from a stand-up background, and it's a lot easier to absorb jab, cross, hook than showing someone how to do it, armbar. So I really like that because I kind of figure out the same thing myself, where I understand the instructor. Um, they have white belts, blue belts, purple belts, brown belts in the class. So if it's a mixed class, they have to kind of show everything. So I kind of had the same approach where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on the first thing they showed, and I will mentally check out for everything else because there's no way. I'd rather absorb one thing really well than five things, somewhat, or maybe not even. So I think that was a very that's an awesome approach, because I noticed that when I started doing that, eventually the techniques were overlapping, and then over the months I could absorb two techniques, three techniques, simply because they're relatable to another technique that I already done. I just had to change a couple of things, tweak a couple of things, and I found that within a few months I could absorb actually more than one, and I wasn't checking out as much as I was in the beginning. But it took a lot of stress off of my off of my head, kind of like not being hard on myself for not understanding everything, because obviously I'm kind of a person that I really want to learn everything as quickly as possible, just like you. Like I get obsessed, but the problem with that is that you're very hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of class when I came back home, and I'm like, I'm just gonna quit this because I'm just not getting this. Like, this is too hard. And it's not that it's too hard. I was just trying to learn too many things at the same time.
Yeah.
And once I know I talked to a couple of people like Crew Joey, one of our mentors, me and Mark's, and he was like, just relax. Like, what's the rush? Like, you got all the time in the world, right? Just enjoy the process. And then once that kind of happened, then it was much more fun. It brought fun to jiu-jitsu for me, because I wasn't there to really absorb as much as I can right away, but just kind of enjoy the process.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, enjoy the process. It almost sounds like a cliche. It's really hard to do when that process also means you're going to be super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of martial arts is let's enjoy the process, but oh boy, that means I really have to surrender into being okay with being uncomfortable and know that I have the power to speak up if that starts moving from uncomfortable to unsafe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very
absolutely.
that's a very important distinction. I think sometimes people, especially in the martial arts community, like some people we were talking about before the camera started about being, strong and form training considered to be like soft. But even in that martial arts world, some people don't want to be seen as soft, so they'll put up with things more than they should. And unfortunately, sometimes when they do that, it can lead to injury or lead to that uncomfortable situation. So it's really important to like understand what that line is and have the courage to say like, no, this is not what I'm here for. This is my line. And sometimes, like one of the things too, is when people graduate in jiu-jitsu and they kind of get like whipped in the back, they do this kind of traditional thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we saw that one guy who's like, no, I don't want to do that. And the guy's like, why? He said, well, kind of reminds me of my childhood. It's having that courage to say, like, I'm willing to participate, but this is my line. And for me, this is an unsafe might not be mean just physical, it could be unsafe for me mentally, right? So I think that's a very important like line and clarification to kind of have for yourself.
Yeah, like we've talked about that, I know on a couple of occasions, the belt whipping or the gauntlet, whatever they want to call it. And me personally, I don't know, it kind of bugs me to see it. And I get it. They're like, I want to be clear that I understand there are traditions in certain places. Um, but from a trauma-informed perspective, where my mind goes, it's much different than where somebody who's not trauma-informed could see that. They could just see it as, it's just a club being the club, and that's a rite of passage. But like that guy had mentioned in the one video, and if we could find it, we could possibly share it, is, he stood up and he said to the sensei, he says, this is not me. I'm not going to do that. He said, thank you very much, but I'm not doing that. And then the sensei asked, he's like, and like Mark said, uh, you know, and then he actually turned to the camera and said, you know what, this is something I didn't actually realize. This is a tradition that I carried on from the dojos that I graduated from, and it's something that I wanted to carry on, but I didn't realize how much it hurts other people, or it could potentially hurt other people. So he's like, you know what, I'm not going to even do it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's just having that honesty and that self-realization and that emotional intelligence to be able to see that and recognize that is an incredibly important thing too, from an instructor's perspective, I think. Which brings me to the side of when you were going through your recovery, Jenny, how much of it do you think, and can you say, was experienced somatically, and that negative energy that you were possibly storing up? Because you mentioned you got back into it because you came to that realization that it's like, hang on a second, there's something going on. And oh, wait a minute, I figured it out. This is it. It's because I'm not doing the training anymore. And then you pick jujitsu of all things. Like you said, you got to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable a lot. But there's also potentials for triggers, not just for for both people participating in the training, right? So the person who's actually on the offense as well as the person on the defense. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong if there's a trigger that's improperly recognized. So what was that like for you from a somatic experience and moving forward? You said you're going into competition now. So, I mean, there's some positivity there,
Yeah.
obviously, but it's been what you said, 14 months now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a long time to be training and say, okay, now I'm gonna test this. I'm gonna go. I'm going after it.
So, like, help me understand your question for a minute. As far as
Yeah.
like, when I think of like the somatic stored energy, I think of that more in my early days.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about it right now, yeah, maybe.
I guess where I'm going with this, like you recognized you took a year off, you just did your training, and you recognize that it's just that wasn't enough,
Okay,
right?
right.
There wasn't enough of a challenge. So was it something that could have possibly been stored in the body from, that relent or that anxiety, that it was the lack of being in the moment, or just that challenge that you were
I
looking
think,
for?
yeah, and I I don't think I fully 100% know. What if I were going to do some educated guesses? I would think that it's, putting myself, if you think about self-regulation, it
Yeah.
is relaxing in the context of perceived threat, uh, where there's little or no danger. And so when I think about what happened in 2023, it wasn't a terrible year, but we had some big stuff happen. We had a dog who had a traumatic pregnancy and a traumatic birth, and all the puppies died except one.
Um,
I think what martial arts gives me, and especially, just doing, say, forms in Taekwondo didn't really do it for me. It
right.
it had to be in addition to sparring. For one, I mean, I have 4 teenagers. I don't think I said
Yeah.
that earlier. And so martial arts always gave me, and even in the younger days when we had, 5 kids, 6 and under, it gave me the feeling, especially as an extremely petite female, of I can handle whatever these kids throw at me. Because if I can go and spar and clinch, um, and be smashed, that I know that I can handle whatever life's throwing. And so that, I think, is a real mental thing. But I think there's also, just a really good adrenaline release, but all those other chemicals that happen when you're in this place of voluntary mobilization. If you think about the polyvagal theory and Stephen Porges, and for people who don't know, when we're activated in a good way, when we're activated and we don't want to be, that's involuntary mobilization. So like I lose it and I throw something across the room, or, God forbid, I lash out at someone verbally or physically. That's involuntary mobilization.
Right.
We also have involuntary immobilization, when we're frozen, we're stuck. And sometimes that can be for microseconds. Other times it could be for weeks on end with not being aware of it. And so my theory about myself, putting myself in the place of voluntary mobilization, where I'm with a partner, and I'm essentially saying to my partner, I trust you with my life, and you're trusting me with your life right now. And there's some really beautiful neurochemical things that happen. And then constantly needing to relax, and then, but also being alert. It's like this pendulation of the nervous system of safe activation, safety activation. And then you think about how many times you do that in an hour or in a 90-minute class. And I think that's what the thing is that makes it so magical. Is
Right.
here's something that you can kind of do that. Yoga kind of gives you the yang to that yin, to that. So, okay, I'm going to surrender into something that is uncomfortable, but you're not necessarily also releasing a whole bunch of adrenaline and all other good chemicals. There's
Yeah.
benefits that happen to it. So that's my guess.
Okay. It sounds, and I just thought of the book. It just came up to me. It's the Handbook of Salutigenesis.
Okay.
So that's the one I was trying to say early at the beginning, the one that
Wow.
you recommended in the post-traumatic growth program. I remember you put it up and you were showing it to the students or to whoever was watching. Just thought of that one. But what you're explaining also sounds like what we call sometimes is like pressure testing, or even what do you call it? Stress inoculation training. Because
Yeah.
right, because you go through first learning the move, learning to adapt to that move and flow with it. You take a break for a second, and now you put it into a little bit of pressure where there's some back and forth. Like you said, you're trusting that partner, that person is trusting you, but you're allowing each other to increase the stress level a little bit. And then you increase it until it gets to the point where you're working hard, and then you stop and you pause for about, however long it takes, whatever's comfortable for us to recover, and then you get back at it again. And now we're knowing, and this is what I like about what we try to approach it with from the trauma informed perspective, is that if a person does experience a trigger, let's say, for example, in a role, and we do a rear naked choke on someone, let's say that rear naked choke is the trigger, and we'll take a minute and pause and discuss it, but then also say, look, like you just mentioned, I feel safe with you. If you want to keep going, we can go, but just know that you can feel safe with me. And whatever experience that you had with respect to that specific engagement, that physical activity, it doesn't mean that that is going to be a negative experience for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I can help you go through that stress and release that toxic energy, and help you understand that not everyone that does this to you, especially in training, is going to be the bad person. It doesn't always have to be that negative. So you can let down that adrenaline dump. You can stop that from occurring. You don't have to be in a state of readiness all of the time. So this is how I look at it from that perspective, and how you explained it was really eloquent, because you saw it as, or you mentioned it as, you just went through the reps and then you just got used to it. And then now it's time, I'm presuming, for the next move. And then you kind of start back again from the beginning, move into the next whatever flow drill that you're doing, and then start the same way again and just keep going. Is that?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's all. Any questions again there, Jacob or Mark?
We apply that method to the intro classes and combat arts, where we got people who joined martial arts, and we kind of developed this program just for that reason, because a lot of schools kind of just throw you into a big class, and for some people, it just doesn't work. It's just overwhelming. So we would have class of like, up to 5 people maximum, and it would be a slow transition to just basic training, exposing, to more and more punching, kicking, hard work, and then obviously just talking about their interest and kind of getting to know these people to see if there's any triggers and stuff like that. And then once you're transitioning to like a big class, I would just make sure that I pair up that person with someone that I trust and I know is a good person for that transition. And it was kind of like a slow exposure to kind of build up that, I guess, callus, to kind of like mental callus, to kind of make sure that these people can actually enjoy this process. Because I find that in a lot of schools, when you just get thrown into a class of 30 people, that's, for some people, that's a big step, and you never see them again.
Yeah. What about yourself, Mark?
Yeah, I have a female client that I'm currently working with, and for a while I was kind of like, I don't understand why she's training with me, because I was seeing some things, her being a little bit like, if I spoke to her and she would speak back, she would not look me in the eye. And there was certain signs there, and I was starting to wonder. I was like, okay, am I doing something that's making her feel a certain way, or is she coming into this with some already things attached and it's making her feel that way? So I tried to like let her lead. I asked her what she wanted to focus on, and I would train her, but I try to let her lead in the sense of like what the intensity was going to be, or how she wanted to kind of do things, so that I made sure she had, like, she felt like she had the power to dictate how the session was going to go. And I would train with her, and every time I would ask her, feedback on how that class was, how she felt. She would always have something positive to say. But what I just did is I just let myself watch her, and I let myself try to listen, and I tried to see, engage where her trust was. And when I felt like I had earned her trust, I would then ask her, "What do you think about if we did this?" And started doing like that. And then I started to incorporate like another female as well, so that she could first not feel overwhelmed with doing it with me, but first doing with another female, so that it was still controlled, and she could put more physical and take on more physical pressure without, maybe, because I sensed that there was kind of like a thing between maybe a male energy with her. And I was right. It turned out I was right. And to the point now where I no longer need to use that other female athlete to help and assist. She's comfortable to work with me now, and we're regulating pressure together. But I was right in the sense that she had told me after, she's like, I had some poor experiences with some other trainers, and it kind of stopped her development, and it affected the way that she dealt with other instructors. What I felt really like amazing though was, even though she was feeling that, her desire to train and to get the information regardless, she never let it stop her from seeking it out. But I do think it's like, yeah, it's very important. You have to get to know. It's not just about, okay, I'm going to articulate this technique or this art to you. I need to understand who you are, so that I know how to give it to you in a way that's going to make you feel safe. But also, what kind of learner are you? Are you auditory, visual, tactile? Like, how do you need to learn? And also, where are you coming from? Where I know how to, some people are going to need that more stern approach. Some people are going to need that more gentle, nurturing approach. And I think as an instructor, we get caught up sometimes in our way of, this is how I teach, but we need to understand that we're here to provide a service for our student. And that's going to need us to be dynamic and to kind of have different methods and approaches to cater to the students' needs in order to provide them the best service.
Nice.
Yeah, I like that. I think this is sort of a very delayed answer to your question, Eric, about, what was it? Is it about 2023, the negative stored energy or whatever? I was thinking one of the things that happens in a 60 or 90-minute class is that I'm constantly assessing, constantly giving myself the chance to have choice and voice over my body. And one of the main reasons I left the Muay Thai place where I was training is the coach was young, but he didn't quite understand. I didn't feel like my choice and voice over my body was respected anymore. And
Okay.
and so as a 46-year-old, I'm going to be really paying attention to, okay, I'm looking out here for the risk of injury. And so I'm going to pay close attention to my body. I'm looking out for what I perceive in my training partners. And I'm also paying attention to who I am this day and what I bring to the mat. So am I a little extra tired? Did I eat some junk food yesterday that's going to make me feel more sluggish? What's my response to pain right now? I mean, a month ago or so, I was at an open mat at my gym, and I went with this girl from another gym I'd never seen, more advanced than me. And next thing I know, before on the ground, I took an elbow to the head. And I could have accepted the apology and gone on, but I was like, no, we're done. I did not feel safe with someone like elbows to the head accidentally in the first 20 seconds of a round. I was like, that might not happen again, but I don't choose to put myself in the position where it might, because it was a serious clunk.
Right.
I could have just chose to go on, but that it's like always assessing, okay, where am I today? And being really respectful of, okay, we talk about the window of tolerance, and the growth happens when I'm here, right? When I'm right at the edge of my window. Growth
Yeah.
doesn't happen when I'm outside the window. That's when I start deteriorating. And
Yeah.
so, especially for females coming into martial arts, learning, okay, what's my window of tolerance and how can I give myself voice and choice in this space? And it's okay to tap or to step out. No, like I don't feel like I don't need to defend myself to anybody. Like I can
Right.
just say, I'm done or I'm taking a break. And so, for random people listening or watching who are thinking about choosing a martial arts, I would just say, pay attention to a place doesn't necessarily have to advertise that they're trauma informed. But if you feel it's a place that's going to respect your choice and voice, then you might be in a good space. If not, then probably not.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up. Thanks for sharing that, actually, because it made me think of Jamie Marich's book. Um, and she mentioned that too, is that at the end of the book, as she was concluding, she was saying, not all places necessarily will say that they're trauma informed, but a good couple of days in training in a certain school, in a school, if you're open to looking for it and that's what you're looking for, can really tell you whether or not it's going to be a place that's going to help you get empowered and feel empowered and listen to you and train, and so you can train comfortably. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, is that some places, yeah, they're rigid, they're very traditional and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean that the person who's teaching can't be a person, can't be a kind human being. So that's one message that I would like to send out, and it's the message that we always talk about, and we try to get people to understand is, and it brings me to the next comment too that we mentioned just before talking, is that having a trauma informed approach doesn't mean that we have to be soft, or that we're not we're not going to get good, we're not going to get stronger, we're not going to recover better, we're not going to be good soldiers or warriors or law enforcement officers. What I'm getting at is that having a discussion and being open-minded is a good thing. And having some of that self-awareness, that emotional intelligence to understand, hey, do I have what I need today? Do I have the emotional regulation? Am I too depleted? Is my vagus nerve off balance or uncalibrated to the point where I can't have a conversation with somebody because it might not go well, or I might feel really horrible after? The other thing is that having a trauma-informed discussion, like we said, and I love using this analogy, is that it's like the naloxone in the first aid. So if anybody's taken first aid in the last little while, they've introduced, this is how you use naloxone. Naloxone is a completely inert substance if it doesn't need to be used in an individual that hasn't overdosed. But if the person has overdosed, it gives us that time, that moment in time, to be able to get them the help that they need. A trauma-informed approach, or just being open-minded and emotionally intelligent and emotionally available to somebody who's in crisis, could be that one conversation that helps them out for the rest of their life and have a really positive impact on them. If that isn't required, great. You just come off as a really nice, genuine person, right? That's amazing. But truly, it can really help, and it can help keep students in the dojo, in the school. It can help grow the student base and helps with the reputation. I don't know, like I've had bad experiences in schools, and I said that I was never going to go back, and I haven't. I actually, there's one that I did go back to, and my wife was actually talking to me about it. She's like, "Why did you do that?" I was like, "Well, I really loved the training, and I wanted to get something out of it." She's like, "Yeah, but you there's things there that drove you out of that place that really bugged you." And so she was right, because then I experienced it again, and I was like, "Wait a minute, why did I just do that? I should have listened to my wife." But it brought you, it was, and it the thing was is that the feeling that I felt before I left came back exponentially quicker. There was a force multiplier. And so it was weird. It was like within not even 2 weeks, I was like, no, this, I remember why I left. This is not for me. So in your experience, like as an instructor, like when you said you got your black belt in Taekwondo or second Dan, up to like when you were teaching, what did you see from learning to then teaching, or did you teach when you were a black belt in Taekwondo? Did you
I
notice a
taught,
difference in how people taught? And were there things that happened to you when you were learning that you said that you weren't going to do as a teacher, a martial arts instructor?
yeah, I don't think I have a lot to speak to that, mostly because in the system that I was in, pretty much everything was scripted. And so you had to, not that it was a completely scripted, but you had to follow all of these elements so much that it almost was scripted. So there wasn't really
Okay.
freedom in how someone taught a class. And I think I got to a level 2 instructor, but I didn't, uh, I was always a substitute. So I didn't teach much. I probably wouldn't have lasted very well either, because I'm creative and innovative, and so I wouldn't have lasted anywhere where I was required to follow a script.
I see. Okay. We're looking at being open-minded and having that emotional capacity to be able to help students move on. What's your experience like? And can you actually say that like where you're training right now in terms of like the jujitsu as an art in itself, what you're doing now, do you see that a lot? I mean, you've been there for 14 months, so I can kind of see, I would presume that it's positive for you, but um, the overall atmosphere, like you have that, obviously you have a sense of agency and control over yourself. You have that voice. Um, what are some of the things that you can like encourage people to do and look for when they're
Mm,
looking at a club,
yeah, yeah.
looking at a school to go train in, from your experience? Because you're using it first to gain the knowledge and the education and the experience, but you're also using it to help regulate yourself. So what can you?
Yeah. Yeah, well, for example, yeah, the place I chose now, shout out to Aries, Arizona. The first thing I noticed, it was a lot of gray hair in the room. And saying goodbye to a teenager who's off to work. So I noticed a lot of gray hair. What that means to me is these are all people who want to get up and go to work the next day. Really good sign, especially as a middle-aged person. One of the previous places I trained, it was a lot more of a fight club feeling, and it was a great atmosphere. But you got to figure out what are these people's primary goal. If the people's primary goal is to go win a fight, it's going to be a lot different of a vibe. And so
Yeah,
I looked for the gray hair because, again, I was looking for somewhere there was longevity. A
yeah,
really good thing to look for is what's the owner's relationship with his or her coaches, because I've been in some martial arts places where it was very hierarchical. And of course, you're going to get that more in traditional martial arts. But even so, you can have the traditional hierarchy, but what's the relationship? Are they friends? And are they comrades outside? We had one of our primary coaches got a stripe on his black belt a month or two ago, and it just he just about broke down and started crying when he talked about our owner being his mentor.
Okay.
And I've been in so many places, well, one in particular, where it was all talk. It was talk about we're a martial arts family. Well, it was a family. It was just a toxic family, whether it's backbiting and infighting and drama. And sometimes it's not easy to tell that from the beginning.
Yeah.
But looking for these dynamics, and I guess being knowing what I see, and I just see this online because by being in a jiu-jitsu group, women over 40 thing, I see a lot of women share things about what happened, something that's not acceptable, something that really should never happen, but saying, but I can't leave the gym because. And so not getting so married to a location, because I think that's what happens, is because people find the benefits of any sort of club, academy, dojo, but then when they see the negative, they're already they're cooked, so they don't real they're trading up one for another. They're trading up maybe a healthy environment.
Yeah.
And you just can't pay. There's not a price that it's not worth
Yeah.
it to stay in a place that's not healthy. Because I can promise you, unless you live in, the middle of nowhere with literally no other place, there is another place down the street that's better. So look for the owner's relationship with his or her coaches, and look for people who want to go home and come back the next day.
Yeah.
And look for flexibility within. Yeah, there's different personalities, but how does the coach check in with people?
Yeah.
And how does the owner, it's really the owner, how does the owner respond when people question his or her authority?
Right. Right. And how have you felt, like, obviously you like it where you are, so how have you felt that is that?
Oh yeah, I feel like, yeah, and that's why I say we were out to dinner last night with the owner and his wife and a bunch of other couples for somebody's birthday. And, here's another thing. People will stay after class for like 20 minutes outside talking.
Yeah.
That tells you that there's real relationships. The desire to invite new people in, that there's not cliques. And so you can talk about,
Yeah.
how is this trauma informed, or how is just this healthy? And usually some place that's healthy, you may need to be more of an advocate. I mean, you guys have an amazing thing in being trauma informed first, but a lot of people are trauma informed without knowing it,
Yep.
by just an instructor who's going to check in and say, hey, are you okay?
Yeah. And that's a byproduct. I think that the trauma informed piece is a byproduct of just being a good
Yeah.
person. Right. And that brings me back to the whole, like, no lock zone thing. Just be a good person, right? If you're checking in and it's not required, you're just showing that you're a genuinely nice person, right? There's nothing wrong with that. No, there's no loss. I mean, you could have a person who's, having a problem, and you say, hey, how you doing? I'm just checking in. They could tell you to go pound salt, or use the other obscenities and vulgar words that I'm not going to say right now, um, but eventually they know that you're being genuine and you care. And then some people eventually open up, right? Over time, the kindness gets through. Um, I know I've experienced it too. Like, there's you find it, you don't see it right away. I've had it in the past. You don't see it right away, and it's really good. And sometimes you're like, no, I'm going to stay because this is, I've gotten so far, or whatever it is. But you're right. I think it's important to make sure that we take our mental health seriously. We take the toxicity seriously, because eventually, if we're there and it's too toxic, I just think it stops the growth. as a student because there's other preoccupations involved. But
Yeah,
having the ability,
that was one of the places I left. It turned into that I was the only female who attended these morning classes, and like I can hang with the guys. I have 4 brothers, but there was no awareness that there's just like no basic respect, as in, it was very much locker room, like high school locker room. That's beyond hanging with, and I didn't really realize how negative
Yeah.
it was for my training until I realized I was having to force myself to go. And so I think what I was trying to think through earlier, which I didn't articulate very well, it's the sunk cost fallacy, which is I've invested so much here, so I should stay.
Okay, yes.
And the sunk cost fallacy is a fallacy. And so just having the courage to move on when it's not the right fit.
Yeah. And that's true. And because you feel that way, sometimes you also feel like, well, this person, helped me here. And there's a lot of things that happen there, right? So that's a good point to make and good things to look out for in terms of having a good place to train, because why do people pick out and why do people seek training in the first place? Well, you've mentioned your reasons for it. I have my reasons. The majority of the people, 85% of them, and I'm just putting this number out or that percentage out there, but the majority of people seek training because they're looking for another outlet. They're looking for something else that's going to give them a sense of agency and control over themselves and help them regulate. So we're there because we're looking for something good, not the toxic. So when it becomes a toxic environment, then it's difficult to have that learning environment. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add there, Jacob or Mark.
I mean, that kind of
With started off in a traditional background.
go ahead, go ahead. No, I'm just saying.
Go ahead, Jacob. Sorry.
I think what you said was
Okay.
very important. That people stick around after class because friendships are formed, and I think that's a sign of a very good school. And I do agree that you have to have people in the school that they want to go to work next day, because there's a big difference between people who want to compete and people who just want to enjoy this. Hence, most of the time, those classes in most of the schools are divided, and they have like competition classes and stuff like that, simply because those people have different objectives. And I'm at that stage. I just want to enjoy myself. Yes, I have to go to work next day, and I work physically, so I have to be able to lift my arms and sometimes go down my knees and stuff like that. If I can't do that, then that's not the right place. But I think, like you said, for me the biggest sign that it's kind of almost like a brotherhood is when people stay. And I mean, we sometimes stay for like an hour and just talk, right? And
Yep.
then it's just I think it's when we go out, we all go out together. It's I think that's a sign of a very, very good school. And I think when I look for a new school, although I mean I haven't looked in a while, I mean I'm in the right spot. But if I had to find a new spot, it would be more like I would come in and kind of people watch first and see how people even talk to each other. Are they respectful? Stuff like that. The interaction, not just between the owner and everybody who's teaching, but also people who are there and how they talk to each other. Just
Yeah.
to kind of see who's actually in the school. So yeah, I would say that is extremely important.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, one of the things that like I started traditional martial arts, and everything was very by the book, and you had to be punctual. Yeah, you had to have your uniform a certain way, and some of that was good. I learned some very valuable things from that, but I also felt like I was choked and I was controlled. And although I was being formed into a disciplined person, I didn't feel like a person. I felt like a robot. So I think it was that was the one extreme that I had felt. Then I went into an MMA gym, and I started training at an MMA gym, and it was the polar opposite. It was meatheads. It was very much ego, confrontational, and it was like there was no respect, there was no budo, there was no tradition. So I went from one extreme to the other, and I didn't know what I wanted because I was like, I don't like this too much. I don't like this. I don't like this, but I could appreciate what they were trying to both offer, but it didn't fit in for me. So for a while, I had a preconceived notion on what an MMA gym was like versus a traditional gym, right? And then I found combat arts, which is where Jacob and I met. And the thing that I noticed about that place, it was very intimidating walking in because you had a lot of killers. And I'm talking about at a different time period as well, a different era of combat arts. But it was like you walked in and there were some serious people in there. But the one thing that I noticed, very welcoming when I came in, right? The coaches weren't just telling people what to do, they were training as well alongside of them. So that was, for me, that was like huge. So they weren't just barking orders, they were suffering with them. So that was a very important thing for me to witness. The other thing is like as I started to talk to these instructors or just work on the bag, one of the things I noticed was like if somebody was new, was staying after class to hit the bag, somebody else from across the gym who noticed that person wasn't doing it quite right would come over and give them tips. And I thought that was awesome because like everybody was kind of looking out for each other and there was like a standard here. And there's a consensus of what our performance should be. And if you're not at it, it's not something that I laugh about or look down upon. It's something that I come over and help you with. So like these are really important things. And the other thing was is like our lead instructor, he never claimed to know everything. He would actually encourage you to go out and do research and go check out other places. And it's funny because the person who was telling me go and find elsewhere, as opposed to like, no, stay here, be loyal to us, had the opposite effect. It made me never leave. So that I think if you're going to be vulnerable in martial arts, you're going to go in as the person who doesn't know anything or who doesn't move the same way or doesn't have that. You want to, you're going to be vulnerable to somebody, but you know what? The choice you have is who do I be vulnerable to?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I'm vulnerable to people who I know have good morals or have good character, but also care about my success, not just theirs. So that was a thing that I looked for that I felt would really help. And honestly, that's what made me fall in love with martial arts even more and think about actually like I could teach, I should teach, because they give the opportunity. It's not like they put a ceiling above you. Like I'm your instructor. I want you to get good because it makes me look good, but you can't pass me because I'm your instructor. Whereas these people, they were like, once you got to a certain point, they're like, yeah, man, take the mantle, share it. They invested in you so that you can then take their place. And I think that's what a difference between a good leader and a great leader. A good leader makes good followers. A great leader makes good leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like that. And even when I first met Mark and started training with them, just in drop-in classes and stuff like that, in terms of like the warm up and the cool down and stuff, I found that right away, the synergy between the people. It's like, just because I'm done my 20 squats or my 20 sit-ups or my, push-ups or whatever it is, if somebody else is still going, somebody else is still going to do something else just to be able to be there with that person and like suffer with that person at the same time, right, just because I'm done. And I do that too now, right? And that was an army thing when I was in the military. It's like, no, you all work together. And just because I'm done my 20 push-ups, then I'll go into a plank position until that person's done their 20 push-ups. I'm going to be there with you. We're going to go through this together, right? And then they see that, and then they're people, that's building trust with people. You're there to help them out, right? Just because you're going through a tough time doesn't mean I can't be there with you. And that brings me to the whole trauma informed approach thing, right? Like if we can relate and help people understand, hey, you know what? I might not know your whole story, but I'm here and I'm ready to help, right? And I don't know. You were about to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Jenny. I thought I heard you.
Oh, yeah, sort of. It just, everything that Mark was saying was making me think of, yeah, um, it was just very eloquent and beautiful. But, I earlier I emphasized the owner. Another thing to look for is that was the difference between the Muay Thai place I was training. I trained at two Muay Thai places, but the place I was training before now, I could go to a different class that I normally didn't go to, and I might as well have been invisible. Uh, as in, the coach didn't introduce him or herself, and the students didn't introduce themselves. And I just accepted that because I was just like, this is where I train. I just kind of accepted that as this is the way it is. And then where I train now in jujitsu, it was months. At every single class I went to, every student would introduce themselves, not because the instructor said, hey, you should introduce yourself, but because that was the culture. And so having a culture of bringing inclusion feels so like, um, you know, what everyone wants to say, but having a culture of we're going to notice who's new and we're
Yeah.
going to bring them in. And yeah, that's just it's something that can't be replaced.
Yeah. No, it's very good. I think we touched on everything from trauma informed, why it's okay to be trauma informed and it's not necessarily being soft. Um, and actually, it touches on the next point is that you mentioned just before we started recording too. We were talking about it, and this is a really good touch point that I want to make sure that we talk about because you had the comment for it. So being, let's say, for example, somebody who's experienced a perceived traumatic incident and they're trying to cope with that and they're looking for strategies to move ahead. Um, you had that the point that you just wanted to make in terms of, you know, I equate it to kintsugi, that Japanese term where they, there's a broken bowl, and I'm paraphrasing like crazy, but when that piece of that dish, that thing is reconstructed, it's reconstructed and it's much more stronger and beautiful than it was before it was broken. And not to say that things weren't beautiful and great before that, but being in that state, being traumatized or dealing with mental health issues, and then going through the motions of growing and resilience and stuff, that post-traumatic growth makes us better if we understand how to navigate that landscape. And there was something that you wanted to mention too, when we were talking before we started recording. So, and then we can close off with a few other things.
Yeah, I was thinking about how that if one were going to argue that, well, trauma informed, that's just kind of it's just kind of a new thing, and it's kind
That's
of just
bulky. Yeah.
it's woke or it's liberal, it's like what, I don't know what Canadian politics are, but
Let's not get started with that.
the reality is being trauma informed, and I like to teach people, my job right now, I'm going to be trauma informed with myself.
Yeah.
Being trauma informed with myself gives me the ability to be way tougher than I could ever be being non-trauma informed, because I'm aware of my threat response system, and I'm aware, so if I'm dissociated, I'm going to be a little bit frozen, and so I'm not going to be able to activate my voice fast enough.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be, and that could be, I'm just not going to tap fast enough, or I'm going to be in my threat response, my limbic system, so that I can't even make the right call situationally. If I am trauma informed with myself, then I will have my frontal lobe still engaged so that I can be reasoning and so I can think through logically my choices, even if that's just a milliseconds. And so it gives me the ability to stick out longer. Okay, I'm in a choke, and I can still breathe. It's really uncomfortable, but I can still breathe. So I can still play with this. And so, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So it's not just that trauma informed doesn't mean we're soft. It's that being trauma informed makes us stronger and tougher if we're going to just be tougher martial artists. But then that brings with it, it's like the stronger we are internally, the better we walk out of the gym, or the better we walk out of the dojo, because we're just like, wow, I just really faced some giants in there. You just talked about going through the gauntlet or whatever, you had to do. And it was brutal. But if you hadn't been in a regulated mindset, you wouldn't have emerged so strongly.
Yeah, and no, that kind of brings us right to the beginning, and that's what it was. It was well designed. The crafting of the way that this was performed and done was amazing, and without giving away too many tools, but it happened over time. We're introducing, here's the techniques, and we're just working on one for 2 weeks, sometimes a month. Just get this down, because there's a bigger picture, right? Everything else is going to build off of it. And after a year of just going back and forth there's 3 steps forward, we're going to take a step back, we're going to revisit this. And that's just the way that it went for a year. And then finally the day came, and that's what it was. It was 3 different body types, 3 different levels of experience, and 3 different objectives. Deal with it. And yeah, it was tough, but I felt myself not wanting to regulate at first and just use brute strength and ignorance, but it doesn't work that way. You got to regulate. You got to be in the moment, and you got to figure out and problem solve, because once the fine motor skills are gone and it's all gross motor, we got to bring ourselves back to, no, I still need some fine motor skills here, and I need the technique to come back into play, because brute force and ignorance is not working at all.
Because brute force and adrenaline will take you about 30 seconds at the peak.
Yeah.
And that's people don't know that's it's really stark.
It is. And we teach that in our trauma informed program. As we talk about the stress responses. I really focus on the reticular activation system and talk to people about what that is, and waking up the mind, and having a good access to the RAS, the reticular activation system, so that we're not always relying on what do you call it, the subconscious mind to do all the work, right? So because we're naturally wanting to be in stasis all the time, and that's just the way we are. But having the RAS activated is really important, that mental and that physical growth and that stimulation. So but yeah, it was amazing. Anything else you want to add before we kind of close this off? Or what's some more training that you guys got going on? That's the other thing too. So I want to make sure that I identify this. When I started the training with you, or through your program, it was forward facing. It was the Forward Facing Institute. Now I see a new logo, which is really cool. I like it, because it reminds me of a phoenix, and I think that's what you were going for, perhaps. Yeah. And the name Resilia. Talk to the listeners and the viewers about that, and where you are, first of all, and how they can access your training, because that, I think, is incredibly important.
Yeah, so I'm in Chandler, Arizona, so a suburb of Phoenix. And yeah, so what we're seeing right now is we have the merging. There's Forward Facing Institute, which I created with Dr. Eric Gentry. We ran that together for 4 years, and then he's ready to go do some different things with some clinical populations and with some research studies. And I figured I'm ready to go really focus on the paraprofessionals. So so the Resilia, I actually started originally 6 years ago when Dr. Gentry started mentoring me, but then I put that on hold as we built Forward Facing Institute. But the Resilia and the Phoenix, to me, when I was ready to make a new logo, I was thinking, well, yes, there's a Phoenix, which is where I live, but also I ended up, as part of my just trauma processing, I did a lot of sand tray after a number of years of traditional therapy. And that was really helpful for modality for me, just to work through some pre-verbal trauma. Well, one of my symbols that I used a lot was this Phoenix. And so the Phoenix to me has always been very symbolic of think about this rising from the ashes.
Yeah.
And as I think about post-traumatic growth, the phoenix is, she wrote, and there's actually a collage phoenix behind me that someone made. But resilience is always all about how can we rise from the ashes of the adversity, of the trauma, become better humans after. So
Yeah.
we do have the post-traumatic growth specialist training. It's a 9-hour training, and definitely want to give your listeners a coupon. I think we'll figure out the coupon code so we can put it out in the show notes, because
Sure. Thank you.
I think it's good, but I wrote it. But I think people can go out and read the reviews. And
I love it.
the main thing about it is that here's what's ironic is, because I was just researching a little bit before this episode. The only other, at the time of this recording, the only other trainings or certifications for post-traumatic growth anything are only for clinicians, which is so ironic since the founders, Calhoun and Tedeschi, said it's not, post-traumatic growth is not accomplished in a clinical setting. And so our training was written and developed and taught by non-clinicians for non-clinicians. And that's what really sets it apart. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and the interesting thing is that you had Dr. Gentry help you out. And so that's your forward facing, and the post traumatic growth specialist program is in the US. And if we were to kind of go back to where I started, it was kind of the same thing. I was looking for something from a non-clinical approach.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, the Traumatology Institute, Dr. Anna Baranowski, also worked with Dr. Gentry and created and formulated the Traumatology Institute and a lot of the programs, and one of which I took, which is the Community Workplace Traumatologist program, which is a paraprofessional program, non-clinical.
Yep.
So it's funny how that connection is there, and it seems like Dr. Gentry is always helping. He's the architect and the builder and the helper of a lot of programs to help people out in a non-clinical approach, and then he's got tons of research out there. So it's really cool where I took this program through forward facing and started talking with you, and then we find out that a lot of it trickles down from the non-clinician training from the same people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Those that are willing to help people out non-clinically and give them the tools to be able to help others, they seem to be the same people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think when I've never met Anna, Dr. Bernowski, but I think what sets people like her and sets people like Dr. Gentry apart is they don't see themselves as any different than us. And he said for years that 80% of what he does can be done by the average person. And so, and that's what I did with him and with the post-traumatic growth and with the forward-facing coaching is, okay, what's that 80%? And how can we standardize it and spread it? So yeah, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, that's for sure.
For sure, for sure. So in closing too, like we talked about it, we talked about the benefits, we had just we had our conversations about it. What can you say, like from your experience, and what can we post, like how can we help others out there spread the word that we're not being weak when we're trauma informed. We have a trauma informed program that we're developing, and we've worked on for quite some time now, the three of us. And what are some of the greatest benefits? Like, I mean, if you could highlight two really good benefits to having a truly trauma informed program where we're actually teaching we're teaching students in the actual trauma informed program about, here's how you get activated, here's your stress response, here's your level, here's your different stages of response. We're educating you on the reticular activation system and how your mind and body are connected. What are two key things that, if you can impart and let people know, that having a trauma informed school martial arts program that they can benefit from and help them grow and succeed in what they want to do? what are those two big things? And probably it's probably a big ask, but I want people out there. We all want people out there. We see where we're going right now in society, and we can make a really good positive impact with programs like this. And the three of us believe in it. I know you believe in it, but to hear it from you and for the viewers and the listeners to know from your perspective.
Oh, they've given me time to think about it. Also, I've found two. So the first one, from just being a business owner or financial, is you're going to get women to come and to stay. Studios, academies, dojos don't run without students. And if you want students to stay, you've got to be able to meet them where they are. Especially females train in a predominantly male sport. So it's going to help your bottom line. But I think just in a sense of meaning, of a greater purpose, is being a trauma-informed school owner or coach is going to give people an incredibly deep sense of meaning, because it's giving you language to help your students with the problem that they know they already have, or maybe a challenge. That's a better word.
Right.
And so I think the sense of satisfaction is way deeper when because previously, without the trauma-informed education, there's a language barrier.
Right.
You might know the person has a history, but how in the world do you help that person get from the history, to C, rolling or experiencing the drills and being able to stay relaxed? So I'm just going to be succinct. That's what I'll say.
Copy that. No, it sounds good. It's well put. Anything else to add to close out?
I think that's it.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. Mark, Jacob, do you guys have anything, closing remarks or questions?
I just want to thank Jenny for her time and for her insights and for the work that she does. And I learned some things listening to you, and I look forward to speaking with you hopefully again sometime and watching your work.